Namo tassa. This time I want to talk about something that, of course, I posted today that has two aspects. One thing that was posted, which also was a quote from Goenka, I guess, is about anger in general. Big topic, actually, unfortunately. Still so much around. Dosa, moha dosa. And as much as many people think that they don't belong so much to that category, dosa can have many aspects, many ways to sneak in, even if it's not so obvious because it's not so loud or violent, but still it's there, lingering in the mind in different ways. And he says that when anger arises, it overpowers us so quickly that we don't even notice. Most of the time, of course, exactly. At least for some people, like it is said and like he explains in some discourse, if you have practiced enough and developed quite some mindfulness, you will notice at some point that anger was there. And then you will hopefully deal with it, or you will really realize it just after and basically not feel good about it. But of course, ultimately the point is to have enough awareness and mind control so that you have that presence before it arises and before it translates into some action, verbal action or physical action. If you can feel it just starting to come up in your mind and just recognize it as anger, and so you know it's not good, so just let it go. But for most people, of course, it is a very unconscious process that comes at once, so quick, and then they just realize afterwards. So, and then, like he says, then overpowered by anger, we commit certain actions that can be harmful for us and to others too. And that also that's one big point again, as it is said in different quotes and in the Dhammapada, that many times we think anger is the appropriate reaction, actually most of the time uncontrolled, but then sometimes we feel like we won a battle or something. But as it is said, you are the first person who is harmed when anger just shows up like that. And so you actually harm yourself as you harm others. And also, like people say, it's a bit crazy to keep being angry for a long time after the events is done or finished, over. It's really like trying to keep yourself very sick, even if there's no reason for it, actually. And so it says, like, later, when the anger has passed, then we start to feel sorry and repenting for at least a part of the people, not the ones who think that they have won a battle, and some people start to beg for pardon from this or that person, or some people start to feel so sorry and pray to God and just pray for forgiveness or whatever. But like he says, the next time in similar situation, then again, same reaction at once, unconscious, uncontrolled anger reaction. So the repenting doesn't help at all, of course, in that sense, but it's back to, as one of the benefits of meditation practice, to learn to be present, to be aware, and to control the mind, control the emotions and the reactions. So over time, gradually, you can see that you become less and less angry and you react less and less mindlessly in that sense. Exactly by developing more mindfulness, more awareness, and starting to be able to take distance from your emotions and see when things start to arise and catch them at the start, not after it happened. So that is the part of anger, and we will get back to that later on. Goenka also at some point was mentioning Sayagyi Ubakin in one instance as still a great teacher and somebody who has a lot of awareness, of course, and control of the mind, and of course can have a lot of metta and mudita, and of course karuna. But at the same time, there was that situation when he said that something happened and with one student who was not working properly and basically pretending. So there's a point where enough is enough, and it was deemed at the time that the appropriate response was to really give him a good shout. And of course, Goenka describes that as a great meditator's shout that was shaking the walls, basically, of the center, the pagoda. But there is that aspect too, again, from people who have enough awareness, that sometimes actually that seemingly angry reaction can be the most appropriate, thought-through reaction, in the sense of being the best and most efficient source for the right outcome in that situation, and it doesn't come from an unconscious reaction. But of course, again, there is awareness, and if you have enough awareness, you can think quick, so you are very aware of what's going on, and understanding properly and thinking through what's the best to deal with that in that moment, in that situation, just to get the best, most efficient outcome. And there is also the situation and the example with some people, as there are many like that, who are very addicted to drama, and especially again in Southeast Asia cultures, despite being Buddhist cultures, there's a lot of addiction to drama there in a very raw way, and in that sense, in a very uncontrolled, snapping way. Exactly. Actually, somebody explained that in a video that I watched not long ago, somebody who is half Western and half Southeast Asia culture, and there is that exactly because of the Buddhist cultures. Again, it's a whole conditioning, but the way you behave is somewhat, hypocrite in the way of supposedly respecting other people and not trying to hurt, and not supposedly getting angry exactly, but because they are still normal people, things get built up. So as long as it works like that, people try to contain and remain polite and okay and behave properly, but then it can reach a point where it just snaps, and then it's full-on drama, like hysterical and shouting so loud. And despite being Buddhist cultures, you can witness that a lot around. So, and some people are so addicted to drama, so they can get so easily angry that way. And it's just like children, right? It's a level of immaturity in that sense. And then they get into temper tantrum mode. But the point is that because they are so used to be addicted to drama in that sense, and always the feeling sorry for yourself part, then it just keeps building up, right? And they actually build themselves up into that drama. And basically, exactly just like with children, when you give them that attention, supposedly because you want to be good and help them by compassion or empathy, and you try to be nice and calm them down, you just actually fuel that. Again, that word of fueling the fire, because that's what they want. They are in that mode of, I want to be angry, I want to be dramatic, I want that attention, look at me. And like the kids that I saw, like out of control and crying as loud as they can. And then if you say something, if you try to help, then it just goes up one notch, right? And then because they got the attention they wanted and more drama, and then you try to do it again, then there's one more notch up, so more drama, more loud. So there's that whole build-up as a response to the supposedly empathic, compassionate attention that you try to give, and just makes things worse and worse. And then many times in some situation like this, actually the short proper response that becomes the most efficient is to show them that this is not working, your little manipulative emotional trick. Enough of that, and trying to play games like this is enough. And then if it's appropriate in that situation, then you give that very loud thunder effect, and that actually manages to dissipate that very negative energy from the other person, and then it's down. So sometimes it's the most efficient way to deal like that. And that's the point, because most of the people, of course, don't have that mind control, and ultimately their emotional reaction is just to fuel the fire, right? To give more fuel. And that's why it builds up or it explodes, and then it keeps going for a while. Instead of the water side, which is the calm, controlled mind with mindfulness, understanding what's going on, and that it doesn't help to get angry anyway. So and then there was another quote that's about saying that the fire in your hut and the life inside your body basically are one and the same thing. And then we go back to the fire element, as it is called most of the time, which has to do with the temperature, right? It's the quality of temperature. And that's interesting because, of course, it's part of the four elements that way, but it's also not a real element in a physical sense, right? In a material physical sense. Because the other ones, you can basically almost see it, touch it, right? Even if the air, supposedly you cannot, but you can also have a very developed concentration level that you will see the air molecules, actually. And then water is water and earth is earth. But the fire element is temperature. Temperature, how you cannot touch it, right? But you can feel it. And that element is the one that can affect every other one. And if you studied science, and then we can go back to the idea of alchemy and the whole dream of and things of transforming lead into gold, and it's is something that I studied in science, which is a good interesting part for me because it helped me a lot in meditation to have this whole scientific background too. But especially in geology, because again in geology you study everything at every scale, micro and macro, and for the time same, microsecond or billions of years. And again, that's what helps to give perspective into things. But so you learn that usually why you find those kind of minerals and some are deemed precious, like rare. It's just because it's always still the kind of same basis, as everything is made of atoms, but then they have different conditions, and it can be some elements, but if they are submitted to a certain level or degree of pressure and temperature, then that will be enough to transform the atomic structure, and then they become different elements. And that's why you find also some typical categories of elements beside each other, exactly because of different degrees of pressure or temperature. There are some graphs, so that's why you can have gold and then silver and then other like that or whatever. And you find rubies and sapphires in Myanmar, or jade, or but it's all just again material thing. It's just earth combination at the time with some water element and earth element and different level of air inside all that, and submitted to different condition of pressure and temperature. Then it gives you this little thing that suddenly only humans consider gems. Such a big deal for just stones, right? Again, just very material elements. But only humans are crazy enough to make such a big deal about these things and make a big industry around that, big business. But no, we go back to that so-called fire element. And so that actually affects everything as far as temperature. But again, it's not so material, yet it exists there. And so that's what I meant so it's inside your body, and what you call life is exactly like being alive is just the result of some biochemical reactions within your body that release energy, and you need energy to be alive. as it is said, and also in Vipassana you can be taught, some material fuel sources and then some non-material sources. But again, ultimately, many ways to describe that, and you have this fire within, right? And that's what it is, because when you realize that, supposedly your ideal temperature is around 37 degrees Celsius inside, which is actually quite high when you think of it. If it's 37 degrees outside, you feel really hot and quite sweaty. Yet it is your ideal temperature of proper functioning and aliveness for your body, optimum temperature and functioning mode. So you want to be warm like that, to have fire inside, but to be alive. And that's again life and aliveness, which is at the same time connected to energy as vibrations. And that's what it is. And that's why you have those billions of biochemical reactions per second releasing energy to keep you alive. And that's just what it is. So like I say again to many people, in that sense, you are just a biodynamic, thermodynamic machine. And that's all you are again. You're not much more than that. And as such, you are submitted to the laws of nature that way, just the laws of thermodynamic. But it's a very complicated machine in that sense. And that's why, on the other hand, you actually don't have control over it for the most part. And that's why it's so funny again, especially the New Age kind of spiritual people who like to use big words about their body, my body, and such a sacred temple. There's nothing sacred about your body, It's just a fragile thing, very complicated thermodynamic machine that functions thanks to the laws of nature that way. And yes, your mindset and the energy from your mind and intention affects your body to a degree more than you imagine, actually most of the time. But yet, as far as you would know if you study the basic biology science, you have so many things happening in the body to keep it alive, as it is said, right? And then you understand that you have almost no control over that in general, except feeding it a minimum what it needs to be kept alive and keep on functioning. Even though we go back to the basic of also one aspect of the Buddha's teaching about, the whole life is only a decaying process. After you are born to die, right? You're just going one direction, which is towards death of that body, material thing, that will grow up and get more energy over time and use energy, but then is bound to get sick when it doesn't work so well, to show how fragile it can be. And of course, many people die when it doesn't function properly to an extent, and they don't manage to correct that or to feed it the proper energy or the source of energy. And then it's bound to decay, old age, decay, like anything impermanent, and then done with that body at that scale of time of a lifetime. And that's basically pretty much the only thing that most people are aware of. But actually, the point to become a very high-level meditator and to confirm that you have reached a certain level is when you can develop that level of concentration, which I mentioned in a previous video. And for example, if you experience Bhanganyana, the experience of Bhanga, when you become aware of all those things happening in your body as far as subtle vibrations, that you feel your whole body just as those subtle vibrations that happen billions of times per second. That is actually already quite a high level of awareness, and that's exactly what gives you that real awareness of anicca, our impermanent nature, and that's what we are. So again, there's nothing sacred about it, nothing special, and that's just what your body is that way. And you understand that this is Dhamma which is in charge, the laws of nature, the universal laws, and it's not you. Because as we can say, some basic things like, how much are you in charge of your heartbeat, right? It's more like, again, and due to your uncontrolled emotions and reactions to some emotion and anger, for example, the heartbeat will vary that way, and it will change, but exactly in a way that you don't control it. So, and then same, you get a wound, you're happy to see that the wound is healing. Are you in control of that? How much do you control the healing of your wound? Like when you see that, it start to close up and, can manage to dry up and harden and make a callus and then regenerate the cells, and for some part back to normal, or not back to normal with a scar, but it doesn't matter. How much are you in charge of that? Zero. Dhamma is in charge. The laws of nature are in charge, and you should be really grateful, and of course, for that. But you don't control that, of course. Except, in some parts, some very, very, very advanced meditators, monks can have an effect that way, but again, it's only very few. It's very, very high level of concentration, so that's different. And so that's, again, back to the fire, and you need that fire within. That's the energy inside. So there is already fire. And then if you have this addiction for those Southeast Asian culture to eat spicy food, which unfortunately has become an addiction, again, due to cultural conditioning, and it's not really the original purpose, which was more to preserve, and actually, it can help to kill some bacteria inside or whatever, so people use that excuse, but ultimately, of course, it has become a cultural thing, as much as, it has become an addiction, and people want to eat spicy, but you can see them, which is funny, because they say, I want my spicy food, and then when they eat it, it's almost the same like people like me who are quite sensitive to spices, and you would have a strong reaction, Similar, they make the face, of, oh, that's so hot, but they can help it. They want the spicy food anyway, even if it makes them have a, kind of a strong, negatively looking reaction. But again, addiction, and but in that sense, you have already fire inside, and then you keep adding fire. So it's like adding fuel to the fire. And no wonder then, in those cultures, as I mentioned before, people can be so moody, and addiction to drama with a quick fuse, right? A short fuse that, again, it can snap like that. They seem calm, they try to be okay or polite, but then if it snaps, it's just explosion of the mood. Anger, big anger, and actually, unfortunately, in one way, that's why, again, they are supposedly Buddhist culture, but you can see that in many situations, outside, even in the streets, in the open, when people reach that moment, snapping, then there's a lot of violence, actually. People can be so violent, so aggressive in their voice and in their action. And that also happens, unfortunately, too much in families, as I've heard so many times. Unfortunately, domestic violence is still very common. in those culture that way. In everyday life, there is still a lot of violence and aggressiveness, but it's not surprising in those cultures that, just like we say in Europe, actually you can see with the latitude again, it works. You see the law of nature affect like that. The northern culture, like in Scandinavia, they are actually more tempered people, and they are pretty calm actually. Then there is the middle latitudes, like Central Europe, and those can vary. It's kind of in the middle. And then you can see the Southern Europe cultures, which we call the hot blood, exactly for the same reason. It's hot, hotter climate, hotter blood, and people are more moody and more explosive, and they speak louder and like this. So, see, it's like the temperature element affects in many ways, everywhere. So, but yeah, unfortunately, fire, if you like spicy food, you add fire into the fire already normal within yourself. And then if you live in those latitudes where the weather is hot, then it helps again to give more heat and fire that way. So unfortunately that goes a bit together. Fire and anger and angry nature. And then of course we will compare that to what meditation is supposed to do. And also in general you can say that when you compare that with the high level meditators, and how you can recognize them is when they show that more cool, calm, like pool of water attitude. And that's exactly opposite sides. And that's what meditation would bring. And again, that's why people should practice and spend time practicing meditation. But again, unconsciously there is a part of, being in the culture, the addiction to drama, and anger being normal. When it happens, it just happens. The ego likes to justify that by saying that they don't have time, or they're too busy or too tired to meditate. But it's again justifying your addiction to drama and to anger, and to justify to keep an angry nature, instead of developing a more calm and wise, aware, present mind and nature, which comes with meditation. So here we have basically the notion of anger and fire related together in different aspects, as I meant. Of course, better to not yield too much to that aspect of being human, even though as a human live being, you are alive because you have the fire inside. But try to keep it as just the basic, to keep that body alive and healthy as long as it's meant to be. Again, I'm not going to go there now, but the whole madness now, because it's a big business for pharmaceutical and for some industries, the cosmetic industries too, to try to make you think that you should live the longest as possible. It's better to look young as long as possible, to live the longest. And it's managing to catch on people now, but it's nothing to do with that, It doesn't matter how long you live, and you don't need to live long time. The main point, of course, is to become as wise as soon as possible in your life, the wisest possible, so that you can reach the highest level of awareness and wisdom in that sense, and hopefully then become Arya, and then being done with samsara, being done with starting over again and again with those kind of material bodies full of fire, full of defilements with the mind and everything, and again, which is all the suffering, right? Dukkha, all the dukkha like that again and again, every time. So the purpose of life is exactly to develop as much wisdom as possible that way, as soon as possible, before you die. Whenever that happens, it doesn't matter, so that you don't have to come back basically and do it all over again, the whole cycle, and go through so much suffering body, suffering mind, suffering fire, illness, disease, and suffering emotions, fire, anger, dosa. And of course, meditation again is supposed to give you the opposite side, the calming down, the fire tamed, and more like the water, calming down water, like a big river. Like another Dhammapada quote says that, the small agitated rivers make a lot of noise, but the great rivers flow nice and silently. And to put those two sides together, that actually relates to my last quote in my book, my own book that I have written, that I still wish to be able to translate in Myanmar language properly. If I could find somebody who is really good enough in English and Myanmar language with the Dhamma knowledge, a minimum, to translate. But in one way, the last quote in this book is also a bit the most ultimate in that sense, but it relates to exactly that part where, just as I mentioned in another video, exactly about dark and light side, as people, these categories of people, the darker people or the lighter people, like as positive and negative. But then in that sense, it goes the other way. So here we have the fire, and fire usually also is associated with light. And so many people praise so much light, and it becomes a big goal. And, actually there is an interesting situation also. You can find maybe that interview or not meeting between Goenka and the Dalai Lama. So Dalai Lama, of course, is Mahayana Vajrayana, and they have their own ways to deal with Buddhism. I mean, they have their own Buddhist beliefs and their own tradition and practices. And for them, for that category, the light is such a big deal. But the Dalai Lama also was so surprised when Goenka told him that he had seen the light as far as Theravada, so quick actually. Vipassana can give you access to that very quick, but the point is still what I consider the misconception that, in New Age spirituality also, it's all about the light, be the light. And yes, you can use metaphors, right? That's the point again. Metaphors are good sometimes to give example, to inspire people, to explain things. But at the same time, there are some certain realities about the facts of what those things mean. And actually, altogether, there is a fire that becomes a source of light. Again, high temperature can make things spark or explode. As increasing pressure, right? Again, high temperature, increased pressure, boiling, anger. So there is that idea of light, but in spirituality and some meditations, they are all about that, or try to see the light, experience the light. Did you see the light? But it's not such a positive meaning in that sense, because again, that light is in one way associated with fire in that sense, and that's actually the expression of what's happening within your own nature, yes. So that when you have that experience, that means that you have at least managed to reach that point of introspection and awareness of your true nature, in that sense of that's what that body is, as I meant, and the fire within, and all those biochemical reaction that are like little explosions, which is why you have all those high vibrations, to release energy, right? Energy released, give the light like this. But that's just an introspection into that nature of what you are. And those things that happen billions of times per second. And then you have developed that awareness, at least, to have that. But at the same time, and because you're a live being, thanks to that, you just get the awareness of your true nature as also a transient thing, temporary phenomena that happen billions of times per second, or just during this lifespan from birth to death. But again, it's just something temporary. And so you just get an insight, the proper insight of the meaning of Vipassana, that insight into your true nature of impermanent, transient phenomena. And that's again just what you are. You're just a phenomena, just a material phenomena. So stop thinking so high of yourself and so special and so sacred and so whatever. Not to mention the whole madness of these New Age people about goddess, God, whatever. Again, you're just that. Yes, you're just a transient, temporary phenomena, exactly because of that high energy vibrations happening. But it's all impermanent. It's all anicca. And that's why it relates to the fire, the light. And also when you look at the sun, and people again worship the sun, the light, the sun, why do you have light actually around you? Either from a candle fire or the big fire out there in space, which is called a sun. But it's the same. What's the sun? It's a big ball of fire, energy released so much that gives so much light, but it's also burning at the same time, in a sense that it's all about constant reactions, temporary thing that keeps releasing energy like this, high vibration, and that's all what is. And then one day it will die again. It will evolve to a certain point, to a climax, and then die again, like anything else, at different scale of time and space. So you have the same like mini suns within yourself as biochemical reaction, keeping you alive, releasing energies, little explosion, vibration, that's why there's fire. And then you have the big one as far as the solar system, and then the galaxies. But anyway, so you have that big ball of fire out there, and same, but it's because of so many reaction, constant reaction, impermanent, transient, and high vibration, and then it gives so much light and fire. Then, big thing, which is my big hint, after my deepest experience and awareness, compared to that, is the opposite, as I meant before. As you could say that, people describe deep meditators as supposedly people showing up like a deep, calm pool of water with no rivulets, no wavelets, no vibrations. And then, ultimately, that is the most ultimate state. If you can reach the highest level of meditation, then you will actually cancel all of those vibrations. So you basically go beyond life. I have mentioned before, and again, it is known as people cannot describe. We say we cannot describe ultimately nirvana, the ultimate, because it's beyond the mind and matter. So it's supposed to be beyond language, beyond intellectual concepts, or conceptual thinking. But there are words there, and the couple of main ones are also, you can say, it's as defined, it's through the unconditioned. Everything else is conditioned by the laws of nature, and that's why it keeps changing all the time. And because it's the ordered chaos, which is my first quote in my book, the first awareness that I had that way also. The laws of nature that way are ordered chaos. That's why it's a ordered chaos, in a sense that everything follows some rules and laws of nature, and that's why they seem to work. But at the same time, it's always a constant high vibration thing, chaotic, and that's why it keeps evolving, and from being created to an apex and down again and disappeared and dissolved, because it's not steady, it's not solid, in the sense that it's not something stable, something pure. It's just ordered chaos. Actually, first quote and last quote in my book, and the whole, right there. So so there is all that, but then so the nirvana can be defined, it is defined as the unconditioned. You have reached the unconditioned. There is no more conditioning. You're not subject anymore to those laws of nature. So there's no vibration anymore, no energy in that sense of, vibrating things, frequencies and stuff, up and downs, waves. And then also the other way is exactly to say it's beyond the mind and matter. So in one way, and as I said also, and others of course who have experienced that would say it like that, it's like dying before dying. So if you can do that through meditation, so it's exactly beyond life. So in that sense, it's beyond the fire, the vibrating energy. And so beyond that is Nibbana, when everything becomes steady, yes, like a very, very calm, but so pure. Because it's so pure, it's so calm and stable, so solid, pure, stable. Nothing can affect it anymore. And that can look actually scary to some. And that's also the darkness in that sense. It's the opposite of the light. Then it's beyond light. Then it's the dark, of course, because it's all steady. There's no more vibration. There's no more energy vibrating. There's no light. It's the pure darkness of the purest, most stable phenomena that can happen in that sense, but it's not a phenomena exactly in that sense. It's just nothingness as pure, stable, solid like this, no vibration state. And that's where my big hint is towards science, modern science, that way, that is still trying to find really the explanation, as much as, again, there are so many theories already thrown out, and they think they know already until the next level of telescope or measurements or whatever, when they will realize that they have to re-question everything because they thought they knew, and then, it was all wrong. But that's basically the nature of a black hole. And the whole thing, idea of a black hole, why is it a black hole exactly for that? Because it's the ultimate nothingness and pure, stable, and not vibrating, not releasing all this energy or vibrations or thing. It's pure, stable, and that's why everything can be absorbed there. So that is my longer take on the idea of originally fire and linked to anger first, but I give the extra take that I have on fire versus the opposite, and ultimately beyond everything, again, Nibbana, where there is no more fire, no more vibration, when there is pure emptiness,